talking about dysfunction by design, and that may sound like a bit of hyperbole. Dysfunction by design, how the PA State House rules silence debate and damage democracy. But I am convinced that by the end of this presentation, you will find this to be somewhat of an understatement. Things are bad in some ways getting worse. And we're going to be talking about ways to make things a bit better. And I have to check something here. There we go. That often happens at the beginning of this. I don't know why the clicker doesn't work on the first time, but it does on the second time. So we're going to talk about Fair District's efforts to end gerrymandering. And during that portion of the presentation, it's going to be familiar to many of you. We're going to define reapportionment, redistricting, and gerrymandering. Won't spend a lot of time in that. I'm sure most of you are up to speed, but just in case there's some newbies in the audience, we'll take care of that. We're going to talk about Pennsylvania's two redistricting processes. There are two separate and distinct ways redistricting is done in Pennsylvania. One for congressional districts and a separate way for the state house and state senate. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the rules because the rules are the roadblock to reform for redistricting, for whatever legislative agenda you may have. The rules block any reform getting done. They block progress on all the bills. We're going to talk about that. And we're going to give an example of how the rules block bills that try to reform, such as our redistricting bill. And we're going to talk about how the rules allow hyper-partisan bills to move forward quickly and succeed. And we're going to talk about how this changes. And I'll give you a hint about this. Since you're with Fair Districts, you know this already, that citizenship is a contact sport. And contacting our legislators, telling them that we know what they're doing, we're watching what they're doing, and we expect them to represent us is what we're all about. So reapportionment, as you all know, reapportionment is it's why we have the US Census every 10 years to count the people in the United States and reallocate the 435 houses in the 435 seats in Congress among the states. And Pennsylvania has been trending downward since 1990. We used to have 21, and now we have 18. And in 2020, the projections have been that we might be down to 17, some say even 16. Just an interesting point, the Electoral College has been in the news of late. Yesterday, it reported out that Joe Biden did get his 360 electoral votes and is going to be the president. But the Electoral College, Pennsylvania has 20 Electoral College votes. Those 20 votes come from our 18 House seats plus our 2 senators. Every state gets the Electoral College votes based on the number of congressional seats they have and their 2 senators. So we have 20 electoral votes now. If we go down in 2020, we'll have 19 or fewer. So Electoral College is related to the number of congressional seats. Redistricting, simply redrawing boundaries for state senate districts, about 254,000 people in each state senate district, state house districts, 62,500 in each state house district, and congressional districts, Congress in Washington, D.C., about 700,000 people in the congressional districts. And again, there's one procedure for congressional districts and one for state legislators. Gerrymandering, simply drawing boundaries to benefit a party or candidate. And the word comes from poor Elbridge Gerry, who in 1812 was a Massachusetts governor and approved district maps favoring his party. And a local paper, a Boston paper, decided that one of the districts looked like a salamander, so they mashed up his name with salamander, Gerry, and salamander became gerrymandering. Now, Elbridge Gerry is an interesting case. He's one of the founding fathers. He's not one of the big major lights, certainly, but he's a signer of the Declaration of Independence. He was at the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia. And he was the 5th vice president of the United States, the first vice president to die in office. Not that that's an accomplishment, but interesting fact, I guess. So, and it's a life lesson to us all. You can do a lot of wonderful things in life. You can sign the Declaration of Independence, attend the Constitutional Convention, be a vice president, and you mess up big time once, and that's what follows you around for eternity. We don't recognize him for any other accomplishments. He's known only for gerrymandering. So redistricting Pennsylvania congressional districts. The majority party draws the maps. That's how it's done in Pennsylvania. The majority party draws congressional district maps. Those maps are voted on by the state house, and they pass because the majority party draws the map. It's voted on by the state senate, and it passes because the majority party draws the map. Then they're signed by the governor. You can say, well, if the governor is of another party, the governor doesn't have to sign those districts. Well, the election's coming. This is done late in the day, late in the game. Last time it was done in 2011. It didn't get done until December, Christmas week of December, when people have other things on their mind. And the election was coming. Primaries are going to be in May. People have to know where they're voting. You have to print all those ballots. You have to get, so, the governor really doesn't have much choice but to sign the legislation. There's no public input in this process, and there's limited legislative input. Now, our current legislature, I think less than 30% of our current legislature was around in 2010, 2011 for the last redistricting cycle. And so they may not know that they don't have much of a say. They will often say, well, we think the legislature should have a say in the process, and that's why we oppose your legislation. Well, they don't get much of a say. In 2011, it was a dummy bill that set up the congressional districts, that established the congressional districts, a dummy bill until Christmas week in 2010, I think. And all of the districts, all of the 18 districts were described exactly the same way, as consisting of a portion of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Nobody knew where these district lines were. Nobody knew what the boundaries were. Nobody knew what the districts looked like until 13 hours before the state senate voted on that legislation and passed it. The first consideration, second consideration passed without the boundaries being known. And then the third consideration and final consideration passed when the boundaries had been released just 13 hours prior to that. They didn't have a chance to study those districts and make a good judgment. And it was a fait accompli that those districts were drawn by the majority party, and they were forcing those districts through. And remember, those districts, they were pretty horrendous. That was, Goofy kicking Donald and some of those other terrible districts. So that was forced through. So the legislature actually doesn't get to have much input in that process. Redistricting for the Pennsylvania House and Senate, according to the PA Constitution, it's a 5-member political commission. And it's deliberately political, consisting of 4 party leaders, 2 from the majority party, 2 from the minority party or their appointees. And those 4 commission members pick a chair. And if they can't agree, and they can't, then the Supreme Court appoints the chair. And this is important because the Supreme Court is currently majority Democrats on the Supreme Court. So the chair, when they go to pick the chair this time around, is going to be a Democrat. And the Democrats will actually be holding the pens for drawing district lines in Pennsylvania for the state house and the state senate. The Republicans will still control the process for the congressional districts. And the Republicans will gerrymander, try to get an advantage by drawing the lines for the congressional districts, and the Democrats will try to gerrymander and draw the lines to get an advantage in the House and Senate. And how can I say this? Well, it's, I'm going on past history. It's what they do. They can't help themselves. The Republican Party and Democratic Party are not altruistic organizations. They don't care all that much, I'm sorry to say, about free and fair elections. They want to win. And I'm talking about the higher levels, state level and above. They want to win, and they don't much care how. Certainly the party leaders are that way. So they will gerrymander. The Republicans will do it for the congressional districts, and the Democrats will do it for the state house and state senate. And the political affiliation of the sheriff determines which party controls that process. So there is no public input when drawing the state house and state senate lines. No public input. There's no legislative input. It doesn't have to be passed by the House and the Senate and signed by the governor. This commission draws the lines, and those are the districts, and the only challenge is through the courts. And of course, the lines that were drawn in 2011, approved in 2011, were challenged in the courts. And 2 years ago, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, dominated by Democrats, majority Democratic, said those districts were unconstitutional. They've been gerrymandered. They were unconstitutional, and they gave everybody 2 weeks to draw new districts. 8 parties submitted new district lines in those 2 weeks. Court didn't like any of those lines, threw them out, and appointed its own map maker. Now, a lot of people say, "Oh, you're fair districts. You must be glad about the districts changing." Oh, not so much. We want to have public input into the process. There was no public input with the maps drawn by the academic that drew the maps for the Supreme Court. We had no say in that. It was just somebody else saying, boom, here, these are your maps, deal with it. Wasn't a very good process either way. We'd rather have a process outside of the courts. We want to have a process that works properly and doesn't have to be fixed in the court system. That's an expensive way to do it. Pennsylvania Constitution, Article 2, Section 16 holds that the Commonwealth shall be divided into 50 senatorial, 203 representative districts, shall be composed of compact and contiguous territory as nearly equal in population as practicable. Now, I'm not an attorney, and this is not legal advice, but I think it's safe to say that in contract language, in legalese, shall means will. Will means may, you can, don't have to, and may means you might or might not, who really cares? But when a contract or a legal document or a law says shall, it means you got to do it. So shall be divided into 50 senatorial and 203 representative districts. Yeah, we did that. There are 50 senatorial and 203 representative districts. Composed of compact and contiguous territory, not so much, not so much. And it also states that unless absolutely necessary, no county, city, incorporated town, borough, township, or ward shall be divided in forming a senatorial or representative district. So that seems to mean you can't divide a municipality into different districts. Well, I live in West Hempfield Township, and in our representative, we have 7 precincts in West Hempfield Township. 5 are in one district, and 2 are in another district, the 98th. The 98th district goes up the Susquehanna River from Columbia, Pennsylvania, up toward Dauphin County, goes into Dauphin County for 2 districts. So we split a county, we split a municipality, and we split another municipality in Dauphin County for that district. Lancaster Township, which is a municipality that sort of surrounds Lancaster, doesn't go all the way around, but partially around, is a 6 square mile township. It's basically suburban, densely populated, and they found it absolutely necessary to divide that 6 square mile township into 4 different representative districts, 4 different house districts, 6 square miles. There are people in Lancaster Township, again, suburban, densely populated area, voting with Amish farmers 20 miles away, and legislatively, they have nothing in common. And what they're doing there is that area is trending increasingly Democratic, and so they're taking all those Democrats and they're putting them where they can't do any harm and where they're outnumbered in districts by Republicans. So that's how gerrymandering works. And this is another simplistic explanation. Nothing changes on these 3 rectangles except where the lines are drawn and the results of those hypothetical elections. Each rectangle shows 50 precincts. 60% are green, 40% are yellow. You draw the districts the way they're drawn in the middle rectangle, 5 districts, and green wins all 5 districts, and yellow gets no representation. And the one on the right, you draw the lines that way, and green wins 2 districts, but yellow, with only 40% of the vote, wins 3, and they dominate the legislature. So that's a simplistic explanation of how gerrymandering games the system. Gerrymandering results in fewer choices. In 2016, the State House and Senate, in 84% of the Senate races, there was no primary challenge. 88% of the House races, no primary challenge. And that's kind of understandable. It's difficult to buck the parties. It takes a lot of time and effort. But look at the general election. In 111 out of 228 House and Senate races, 48.6% of the time, nearly 50% of our races unopposed in a general election. Now, I'm sorry, that is not a race. It takes two people to have a race. And one person running, that's not a race, that is a victory lap after the primary. And so this is very important. When you have that many people running in safe districts where they can't lose an election because of gerrymandering, the other party tends not to post candidates. And that happened 48% of the time in 2016. So what that means is the 15 to 20%, maybe 25% of the people that typically vote in a primary are the ones that are selecting nearly half of our legislature. And the people that vote in primaries, I'm a primary voter too, but a good chunk of the people that vote in primaries are true believers. I mean, they are the far right and the far left of the parties. They're committed and they're out there and they have a point of view and they don't believe in the other person's point of view. People say, I will never vote for anybody from that party. They're the devil incarnate. Both sides say it of the other. So what that means is this narrow slice, this is 15, 25% of the voters in Pennsylvania are selecting the legislature for the rest of us. And we are increasingly becoming a state and a country of moderates governed by the extremes, because the extremes get elected by this. If you're a candidate in one of these races, primary races, all you have to do is appeal to your primary voter, your true believer, and you're elected. That's it. And if you do anything that displeases them, you'll get primaried from the right or from the left, and you'll be out. So gerrymandering has a very toxic effect on our governance and the state of this country. Plus, you get job security with gerrymandering. For the last 3 decades, the re-election rate for Pennsylvania incumbents has been more than 95%. Not bad, not bad, especially if you don't have to do much. Now, we keep rehiring these people, and they're legislators. You think they would legislate. Well, in 2013, 2014, there were 5,594 bills introduced. Number that passed, 381, less than 7%. In 2015, 2016, 3,860, 214 passed, less than 6%. Now, we are not suggesting, nobody is suggesting, that all of these bills deserved a hearing. I mean, some of them are just slapdash thrown together because why put any effort into it? They're not going to pass. So they're not all good bills, but among them were good bills, such as our redistricting reform bills that couldn't get out of committee. So Pennsylvania, our full-time legislature, I think Minnesota has a larger legislature than we do, but they're part-time. So our full-time legislature is the largest legislature in the country. It's one of the most expensive legislators in the country. And in these 2 sessions cited, we're the least productive legislature in the country. And that is a trifecta of dysfunction. We're the biggest, we're one of the most expensive, and we're the least productive. And why is that? Well, gerrymandering creates inefficiency. And we've had years of inaction on property tax reform, equitable school funding, unfunded state pension obligations, roads, highways, bridges, infrastructure, elevated levels of lead in children, and redistricting reform. Every year, bills are introduced on these issues. And with property tax reform and equitable school, it's decades of inaction. Redistricting reform, we're going to be highlighting the last 4 years of Fair District's efforts on redistricting reform, but there have been bills on redistricting reform in Harrisburg for over 30 years. Nothing gets done. I want to talk about our timeline for our bills. We had House Bill 23 and Senate Bill 1023, and that was reform the congressional redistricting process. If that passed by July 2020, the Independent Citizens Commission would be in place by early 2021. And then we would also pass HB 22 and Senate Bill 1022 to amend the Constitution for State House and State Senate redistricting processes. Pass that by July 2020, pass it again in February 2021, and the voters would approve it during the primary in May. Well, the bridge washed out on that. I mean, we got stymied, we were blocked. We never got a vote. Never got a vote in those 4 years that we're pushing for redistricting reform. This is a sad story. This really is. So in the 4 years for legislative sessions, 2017 and 2020, our bills, our redistricting bills had broad support. They had more co-sponsors than other bills. We had resolutions supporting redistricting reform by 23 counties and 350 municipalities, comprising more than 70% of the population of Pennsylvania. We had 100,000 plus petition signatures, 500 plus supportive letters to the editors across the state, scores of editorials in Pennsylvania papers supporting redistricting reform, and a survey that showed that 66% of Pennsylvania citizens supported redistricting reform. And with all of that support, more sponsors, more resolutions, 100,000 signatures, 500 letters to the editor, all those editorials, 66% of Pennsylvania citizens supporting reform. We were never allowed a floor vote in the House or Senate, not a floor vote. And in the House, we couldn't get out of committee. And yet, the judicial gerrymandering bill, HB 196, that amends the Pennsylvania Constitution to enable party leaders to create and gerrymander judicial districts, that sailed through. That was introduced in January 2019, passed the House in December 2019. It was voted out of the Senate State Government Committee on July 13th, 2020, and passed the Senate July 15th, 2020. Now, remember, our bills were in there for 4 years and we couldn't get out of committee. And our bills were to fix the gerrymandering process. And here they have a bill, and some of you might say, well, you're being unfair calling this a judicial gerrymandering bill. And I'm sorry, I'm not apologetic about this at all. They want to gerrymander the judicial districts for the higher courts, and certainly the Supreme Court. Because remember, who told the Republicans that those districts they drew in 2011 were unconstitutional? The majority Democratic Pennsylvania Supreme Court. This is their solution to that problem. They want more Republicans on the court. They want a Republican majority that will approve those districts that they are going to gerrymander this time. And in order to do that, in order to get the court they want, they are going to gerrymander court districts. They will do it. They want to do it. It is why they introduced this bill. And they're going to clothe it in all sorts of nice sounding rhetoric about, oh, we're going to give the people of Pennsylvania a chance to vote. And it is politely BS, as far as I'll go with that. So our good bills, with all that support, are blocked, but the party bosses' bills succeed. And why is that? Well, the rules that govern how the legislature works is the problem. The rules govern the process. The majority party writes the rules. The rules give party leaders control over the legislative process. In fact, one committee chair outweighs the House and the Senate and the will of the people, because that one committee chair, and this is true of every committee chair in the House and the Senate, that one committee chair controls the agenda for that committee. He or she is able to decide what bills, and he or she alone is able to decide what bills get heard by the committee, what bills get tabled by committee, what bills get a vote by that committee. And so the committee chair has incredible power. And you can have, oh, let's just say you have a bill with 100,000 petition signatures and 23 counties and 300 plus municipalities that have said we want to have that bill. 66% of the state wants to have that bill passed. Committee chair can say, I don't care. I don't like the bill. I want to be able to gerrymander, so I'm not going to let it out of committee. And that's the way it works. Not only the committee chair, the majority leader and the speaker also have control over the process. First of all, they report, the majority leaders assign the committee chairs and everything. So, and they also take those roles away. So they control that. And a committee chair is going to be beholding to party leadership. So he or she is not going to go against them or they'll lose their committee chair. And this creates unchecked power that creates a dangerous imbalance. And this is where we are today. You know, we like to believe that we live in a representative democracy, but I'm sorry. When you have one person in the state that can block legislation that the overwhelming majority of the state approves, that is not a representative democracy. This is not governance, state government or federal government, that we were taught in civics class in school. This is not a reflection of America, of what it should be, but it is a reflection of what we are in Pennsylvania and who we are in Pennsylvania. The rules are the problem. The rules block good bills and fast-track bad bills, and we showed that with the redistricting and the judicial gerrymandering bills. 4 positions control the legislative process: committee chairs, majority leader, House Speaker, Senate President pro tem. Rules blocked redistricting reform for 4 years, and they rushed judicial gerrymandering through in 18 months. And the party bosses control the process, and what the public wants and what the rest of the legislature wants does not matter. Judicial districts, the judicial districts bill is radical and un-American. It reduces the executive branch and judicial branch. It makes the legislative branch dominant over them. It concentrates power within the legislative branch. This radical plan destroys our system of checks and balances. Our government is set up on a system of checks and balances with 3 co-equal branches of government. This was the founding fathers' model, and Pennsylvania adopted that model with an executive, legislative, and judicial branch. But look, if you have the legislative branch and they can gerrymander the districts for the judicial, for the Supreme Court and the appellate courts, they pass legislation, and those courts are going to approve the legislation, more likely to approve the legislation because it's going to be like-minded justices. It really is a radical and dangerous bill. It's an assault on the American model of a constitutional democracy that's enabled by the rules. They're rewriting the Constitution, and it's no longer we the people, it's we the party leaders, because that's who's in charge. That's who agendas matter. Our agenda as the public does not matter. The rules empower party bosses. They support a radical agenda. Those party bosses support a radical agenda. The rules silence debate, and they get to ignore issues the public supports, like redistricting, like school, equitable funding for schools, like environmental issues. And the rules are so important. They're acted on the first day of the session. The first day of this session, by the way, is going to be January 5th, and they will vote on the rules that day. And in 2019, the rules were about 60 pages. And they're voted on that day. So people don't have a chance to, the legislators don't have a chance to look at them. There's no time for review, really. There's not even a method for public input on the rules once they're introduced, and they're voted on that day. In the 2019, before they passed House Resolution 1, the rules, they passed House Resolution 2 first. And House Resolution 2 held you could not amend House Resolution 1. So before they passed the rules, they made sure there was no way in that session to amend those rules. By voting for House Rule 1, lawmakers willingly silence their own voices and their ability to represent us. They put party before people. It is not transparent, it's not accountable, it's despicable. The current House rules certainly create a fixed game. The Speaker appoints the chairs or demotes the chairs. The chair decides if a bill gets a hearing or a vote. The Speaker, Majority Leader, or Chair can block a vote no matter how popular that legislation is with the public or other legislators. It's not transparent, it's not accountable, it is despicable. So do we have a representative democracy or one-party rule? 85% of successful bills in Pennsylvania are introduced by the majority party. The majority party picks committee chairs. The committee chairs advance that party's partisan party agenda. Here's another issue that's been ignored. Now, around 2016, we all remember where Flint, Michigan was in the news because of lead poisoning in the water system. Well, there are 18 cities in Pennsylvania that have higher levels of lead than Flint, Michigan. And we've known this for some time now. And the worst on this map, the worst counties are in red, and Center County is green, which is the lowest level of 0.6 to 2.0 levels of lead in children who were tested in Center County for lead levels. Now, no level of lead in the system is good for you. And at higher levels, it affects cognitive functions, can cause brain damage, even death. And we've known about this for years, and there have been there have been bills produced since 2015, 16 or so to address this problem. So proposed bills have included lead testing in institutions serving younger children, lead abatement assistance, a task force to study lead in Pennsylvania, and mandated lead testing for real estate sales and as part of Pennsylvania's Safe Drinking Water Act. Those were all introduced in 2015, 2016. None of them got a vote. None of them got a vote. They were reintroduced in 2017, 2018. None of them got a vote. They were reintroduced in 2019 and 2020. None of them got a vote. And what I want to know is, who in our legislature supports lead poisoning in children? None of them support that. But there may be political bosses who find government action, they believe in the small government. They believe the less the government does, the better. And I'm not saying that is an invalid position to have, but I'm saying if the party leaders have that ideological point of view and they get to affect legislation that maybe other people in the state, maybe the people of the state want to have, but that ideological point of view dominates because the party leader has control of the process, that's not what governance is supposed to be. Have the argument, have the small government and the larger government people debate the issue. Talk about the cost. Maybe they think it costs too much to do this. Well, you talk about for every dollar spent on remediation of lead poisoning, you save $200. Have that conversation. But because the leaders take an ideological bent, we don't have the argument anymore in our legislature. They just block any discussion, and you're supposed to have the argument. That's what democracy is. We're supposed to have an argument, and these rules foreclose a discussion on issues like that are important to everyone across the state. I've been around long enough to realize, and I've known enough Democrats, Republicans, and third-party members to realize that none of them, neither party or any party, third party, has a lock on brilliance or stupidity. It's a mix, and there are good ideas from both sides. There are good ideas from the middle, from the left, and from the right, and there are bad ideas from the middle, from the left, and the right. And what we're supposed to do is mix them all together and hopefully pick the best from each. And that's what government is supposed to be. Instead, we have hyper-partisan thumbs on the scale. Now, what would rule changes look like that would change this? And these are just suggestions. But what if you had to guarantee a vote in committee for bills with strong bipartisan vote? The Fair Districts bill in the House in one session had more than half of the House members were on that bill as co-sponsors, and we couldn't get a vote in committee. So if you have strong bipartisan support, the bill gets a vote in committee. If a bill is voted out of committee with strong bipartisan support, it gets a vote on the floor. Bills with strong bipartisan support passed by one chamber should get a vote in the other chamber. These aren't terribly radical things to do. Other states do this sort of thing. In fact, Colorado passed redistricting reform in 28 days. We ignored it. We've been ignoring it in Pennsylvania for 30 years, certainly over the last 4 when there's been a push. They did it in 28 days, introduced the bills in April, passed them in May, and then there was a voter referendum in November, and it passed with 71% of the vote, which is about the level of support for redistricting reform we have in Pennsylvania. But we can't get the bills passed. Why can't we get the bills passed? Well, because, and this is according to the Fair Vote and Bipartisan Policy Center, Colorado, they measured all the states, and the states in the darker colors on this map have good, in their estimation, good procedures that promote collaboration and cooperation and discussion and debate. Colorado got 100% rating from this organization. Pennsylvania's rating was 0. Pennsylvania does not have any policies or procedures in the legislature that promote collaboration. Different rules equal different results. So we need to reform the rules unless this changes, and nothing's going to change. It doesn't matter what your issue is: redistricting reform, equitable funding for schools, Wi-Fi access for rural areas, clean water, clean air. It does not matter what you want to do. Unless the rules are reformed, nothing is going to get done. Otherwise, something would have been done on some of those by now. And we're in this cycle of dysfunction. Leaders draw the leaders draw the maps. Distorted districts protect the incumbents. Majority leaders make the rules. Rules prevent reform. Leaders draw the districts. Distorted districts promote incumbents. Majority. We go round and around and around. And we re-elect these people at a rate of 95%. Now, as I said, the door is closed on the Independent Citizens Commission. That required a constitutional amendment. Can't do that now in time for the next redistricting cycle. So we pivoted to LACRA, which is the Legislative and Congressional Redistricting Act. Now, LACRA basically provides transparency to the process, public engagement. People have a chance to comment on the maps beforehand. It offers clear and measurable map criteria that they have to adhere to, and those criteria would prevent gerrymandering, reduce the ability to gerrymander. So it adds transparency and it promotes accountability. Now, LACRA, no surprise, just sat there last session, didn't get out of committee, but it's going to be reintroduced this session. And the co-sponsorship memo seeking co-sponsors for the bill has been circulated. So watch the Fair Districts website for more information on that. So what can I do? What can we do as an organization, as an individual? And as I said before, citizenship is a contact sport, and we'll talk about that. But you can schedule a speaker. Ruth is on the line here, and you just go on the website and you schedule a speaker, and she gets to assign someone to give a talk similar to this to your group. You can join Fair District PA. I assume many of you already are. Sign a petition there. And also on Fair District PA, there's plenty of information for letters to the editor, for visits to your legislators. You can like our Facebook page and share our posts. Talk to your neighbors about this issue. Write letters to the editor. Ask in your letter to the editor, mention your legislator and tell them you're interested in having them reform the rules, and need to do this by before January 5th, because there's a vote on the rules, and that's on January 5th. Ask your legislator in the letter to the editor why they would surrender their ability to represent us and give party bosses all that power to control the process. Ask them to oppose judicial districts. Tell them that it's a radical plan that undermines the court's independence and destroys the balance between our co-equal branches of government. And ask them to support LACRA. You can hit all those points or just one. but this is what Fair Districts is pushing right now. We're focusing on reform the rules because we have until January 5th to do that. Opposed judicial districts, we'd love to defeat that in the legislature rather than have it go to a ballot and fight that, because there's going to be an awful lot of money coming into Pennsylvania from groups that support that sort of takeover and groups that oppose it. So we'd rather see it defeated in Harrisburg. And then support LACRA. Again, it's just being reintroduced, so it's not the highest priority right now. It will be as soon as we clear the rules. And I'm telling you that judicial districts are going to come up for a vote in January or February because they want to get it on the ballot in May. You can call your legislator. Again, reform the rules. Do this before January 5th. Don't surrender your ability to represent us. Oppose judicial districts. All the same points. All the same points. And a lot of people say, well, you know, I don't want to get on a phone call. I don't like using the phone that much, and I don't like confrontations. Fine. 7 o'clock at night. Nobody's in their office. They're not in their office. Give them a call. Leave a message on voicemail. Hello, my name is. I am one of your constituents. I live at, and I'm asking you to please don't surrender your ability to represent us by voting for rules that give party leaders too much control of the process. And we'd like you to oppose judicial districts when that comes up for a vote. And we'd like you to support LACRA. Thank you very much. So what is that? 30 seconds, 40 seconds? Between dialing the phone, listening to it ring, having the voicemail pick it up, and you giving that message, less than a minute of your time. You can have online meetings with lawmakers. Again, reform the rules, do it by January 5th, oppose judicial districts, same reasons, same issues. Okay, now nobody on this call can really claim that they don't know how to Zoom, because that's what we're doing. So the advocacy group, Fair Districts PA Advocacy Group, can help you with this. They can help you, and the website itself has a lot of information, talking points and other things, and more materials being developed on the judicial districts and reform the rules. So there is help and assistance available to you. Reach out to Fair Districts, and we will get people to help you. We will have people that can train you on how to conduct a lobbying call, a Zoom meeting, lobbying meeting on Zoom. Now, citizenship is a contact sport, and you got some tough nuts to crack. Majority floor leader, Mr. Corman, is one of the people that controls the process. I'm guessing, just guessing, he's not going to be terribly open to reform the rules and giving up that control. I'm saying, leave him a message. Don't put a lot of time into this fellow necessarily. Leave him a message. Send him an email. Tell him what you want him to do. Tell him that you're watching. Kerry Benioff, Majority Whip. Same thing. He also benefits from being one of the party bosses and not going to be terribly open to reforming the rules. Call him up, leave a message, send an email. Now, this member, Stephanie, is a member of the State Government Committee, a very important committee in the House. It's where the legislation will go, likely. It has the last 4 years, so I believe that's where it would go this year. And if that's the case, you know, call her, tell her you wanted to support LACRA. You wanted to co-sponsor it. She hasn't supported fair district redistricting or rules reform efforts, but call her up and you can ask her. This is one of the people that would be giving up her ability to represent her constituents by voting for rules that give party leaders all that power, and ask her, you know, why would you do that? How does that benefit us? You know, you've run for office and everything, and you're there, and the first thing you do at the beginning of the session is give up your ability to make a difference. Just question him about that. Now, Conklin, Representative Conklin, has co-sponsored all of our previous redistricting bills and co-sponsored several of the rules reform measures. So presumably he's going to be a little more receptive perhaps than the other three. Have a conversation with him. Ask him which rules reforms he wants to see go forward. Just and thank him for his past support. that sort of thing. You can do it by phone, you can do it by email. If you mail, please send a postcard. If you write a letter to the editor, please mention your representative's name. And the reason we do that is when you mention your representative's name in the letter to the editor, they have Google searches for their names, and when it appears somewhere, they get a notice, they get to see the letter. It'll probably be cut out and put into a file, and so you get a little more impact that way. Representative Irvin has co-sponsored all of Fair District's redistricting reform bills, but has not co-sponsored rules reform measures. You can just have a conversation with them about that. And that's the presentation. And